Hello, I'm Larry Hoffer, the Executive Director of AIAS, and I'm excited to be part of another episode of Ask an Architect. My guest today is Brandon Burns, who's a Senior Associate at Bennett Partners. Hi, Brandon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Larry. Thanks for having me on. It's pretty exciting for me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So let's start with the basics. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into architecture, what inspired you, and what you're doing now.
My goodness, that's okay. Easy questions first, I guess. I think I am one of the, excuse me, one of those weird people that knew I wanted to do something with buildings. I didn't know what that was as a kid, but when we went on vacations, my interest was in the buildings and not so much the ride next to the building. Or, those are the things that I was drawn to. Those are the things I would sit and just draw on my papers. I didn't know. And then, so I grew up in New Orleans for most of my life. I got a little bit of stint in California, Southern California for a little bit. And then I moved to East Texas, where I'd never even seen a cow before. And all of a sudden here I am in a small East Texas town as a junior high school person, and kind of as this obsession with buildings and things came more and more, there was a career day where an architect came in and spoke, and it all clicked at that point. I was like, that's it. I'm done. I wish I could find out who that person was, but I can't do it anymore. And after that, it was I didn't know any other path. So I've been on that path ever since. That's it.
Great. So what are you doing now at Bennett Partners? What kind of work do you do?
So we are a firm that is mainly does work within the Dallas-Fort Worth region. We since we are spread out, let me start that over. We are mainly a firm in Dallas and Fort Worth. Our work really wants to be local. We have made a focus on trying to focus our work here locally. Because of that, we're a general practice firm. So we've done just about everything. We've done the office buildings we're sitting in now. We've done a dog park. We've done a French bistro restaurant. We've done houses, senior living facilities, multifamily, industrial things, you name it, other than like hospitals or very specialized or aviation. We'll do anything that comes through the door pretty much. But why I say that with a caveat of what we really try to do is, since we all live here, we are all very focused about making sure this area is the best it can be. And we try to push what that means, both architecturally and community-wise, as much as we can. So I think there's a lot of firms out there that, some good messaging that we really care about the community, but I think that is our first and foremost thought. That's what gets us out of bed in the morning. So we can take on some projects that may not be the most flashy projects that'll be on the cover in Architecture magazine. Some of them are, but the ones that can really change a community for the better, we're going to put everything we have into that, or all of our energy into that kind of project. So, we do a lot of projects. We do a lot of work for charitable organizations. Some of it's pro bono, some of it's a very much reduced rate. But we find these causes and we really try to latch onto those and really take an idea from something that an organization never dreamed could be possible to a way to help them raise money and make connections and find grants and find a way to get materials donated to them and do everything we can to make these projects happen. And so we will fight tooth and nail for those projects.
That's terrific. So really involved in community engagement as well as obviously the actual building. Was this the type of firm that you thought as you went through architecture school that you wanted to be part of? And did you think that you wanted to stay in Texas and work for a firm that mostly specialized in local work, like you said?
I think in school, I I was exposed to, and I had a great professor who taught me that architecture can be much more than just a building. It can be really impacting people's lives. It can be small changes that have a huge impact on somebody's. And so it was always this dream of like, oh, that sounds great, and when the rubber hit the road, when I graduated, I got a great offer and went to Colorado, and I worked on some amazing homes and some amazing buildings that was fantastic. But I was there for about 2 years, and I decided, well, you know what, this is nice, but it's not really kind of what gets me up in the morning, right? And that's so I came back to Texas. I did work with a couple other firms that did a variety of work, but I'd always had my eye kind of on the firm I'm at now. And when I had the opportunity to jump in, um, I didn't look back. So I've been here now almost 12 years at this point.
That's great. It's good that your path kind of took you different places, and you found a place that that you can call home. Do you specialize in one particular type of project, or do you really work across the gamut, as you mentioned, all of the different types of buildings and projects that your firm works on? Do you kind of do a little bit of everything?
Yes, so I do a little bit of everything here, and that's part of why I enjoy being here. I think we really never know what's going to be coming through the door. So the idea of me working on one project type, even more than for a month, that's not me. I just want to, I want to, if the constant variety is what keeps me going, and I always enjoy um, not knowing what's going to happen in the next few months or what kind of project we're actually going to get to work on.
So if a young architect came to you, or an aspiring architect came to you, what would you tell them are the most important qualities that an architect should have?
Oh, that's a good one. Um, I think is listening and asking questions and trying to get to the truth of something is probably the most important. Because I think we have a lot of clients, especially if they've never built anything, they come with a mindset and magazine clippings and all the things, right? They come in with a file full of things. But that ability to be able to just sit and talk to someone one on one in a room, hopefully together, and really start asking, what's at the root of this one, or what's at the root of this thing that you like. And from there, you can really start building on a solution that is not an ego-driven solution from yourself, and is not one that is trying to fill a couple of boxes that you're trying to check, or do something that's a new thing that you saw, but really listening to the client and coming up with a solution that in the end the client feels as much as their design as it is your design. I think that's a huge win for us when there's just as much investment from the owner than us for the end product. And I think that in the end, everything that we do comes back to that relationship, either between the owner or a contractor or a city official. And especially being in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, it's a big area, but it feels like a small town, because everybody that's usually building something or in the industry or within the city government, we all pretty much know each other, and we're at least in one way connected to each other. So having those relationships moving forward is the most important thing for us.
What is one piece of advice that you got when you were an aspiring architect that you still think about, or that really impacted you?
Ooh, that was one. I think the one that I might have mentioned earlier about how much more architecture can be impactful. That's not so much the building itself, but the process of where you getting there, and the process for the owner getting there as well. That is a huge thing. I think we can accomplish so much more as architects by looking at the world's problems in that way, and then not trying to figure out how a building can fix that issue, right? And it may be that our issue is not that we need to go design a new building to fix this issue. We may need to get with the right people at City Hall and fix a zoning regulation that's preventing this part of the city to develop. Those are the big things that I learned.
And so on the flip side, what is one thing you wish that you knew before you became an architect?
It's a hard one to answer because in the end, I guess I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I knew that's really all I wanted to do. So I think early on people told me, this is not a 9 to 5 job. This is something you're going to think about at 3 a.m. when you wake up and you're wondering, or you got an idea for something, or you're trying to figure out a issue, that it's an all-encompassing thing. And that's okay as long as you kind of keep it in balance, I guess. But it is something that you don't just go in and check in and out of work. It is becomes your life. As long as you're okay with that, I think there's no issue. I think the people I've seen along the way will really try to struggle against that and really try to confine it to a very set of parameters. It's too hard. It's too hard of a job, too big of a job to try to confine it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, certainly we see still in certain architecture schools that the work is pretty intense. And, there are, as much as we try to discourage it, there are still a lot of schools that almost expect their students to work all night on projects. So if you're lucky enough, obviously, not to have to stay up all night, that's great. But yeah, if you think it is really a job where you're going to clock in at 9 and clock out at 5,
Right.
I guess maybe until you get to a really, really, really senior role, that doesn't seem like the type of profession that happens in.
Correct. Well, I mean, to back up, I think in school, definitely, I couldn't go through architecture school again. I was just having this conversation with a recent grad. Couldn't do it. It's too exhausting. I understand. And, I think there were some people I saw in school that really took it as an 8 to 5 job, and they were able to crank out just as much work as me stumbling in at 2 p.m. and then staying to 2 a.m. They were able to kind of efficiently get things done. But, even here at our firm, it's very rare that someone works more than 50 hours a week. We have a pretty good balance of things. And I guess personally, it's not that I go home and work for extra hours. It's usually I'm thinking about something. If I have nothing else to do, those are the thoughts that are coming to my head. It's not so much a hobby or something like that that's on my mind. So I think there's a good balance. I think our profession has moved a little bit in a better direction than maybe it was when I first started out, when it was expected that you'd work. If you weren't working 60 hours a week, then you're a slacker. I don't see that much more, at least within our local community in the architecture world.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's certainly something that I know that AIS has really advocated for through our learning and teaching culture policy, is trying to shift that mentality. Sometimes it's easier than it should be, and then sometimes it's a lot harder. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So thinking about when you started out as an architect to where you are now, how have you seen the field change relative to sustainability and environmental responsibility?
So I think when I first graduated school, I don't know exactly when it got kicked off, but the LEED was a very big thing, right? And it was kind of the goal of everyone. If you can go work on a LEED project, you're finally making a difference, kind of thing. What I have definitely seen a huge change from is not so much the certification, but just the kind of practical, let's spend the money doing the right things on the building, so much more than just the cost to get the certification of the project. We still do have LEED projects, but where we kind of take it it's an important part of our practice, where we try to integrate it into the design. And either if we have a client that's maybe this is not their priority, their priority really is building an efficient building or building one within a certain budget, or if they're going to hold on to that project for a long term, coming to them and saying, hey, we can do these things and your return on investment is going to be much better. This building is going to be much more sustainable for you financially. Oh, and by the way, you're going to use less energy. There's some passive heating and cooling in the building. There's all these things, and they just think, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. So I think when we look at it, sustainability that way, that's more of the focus of what we're doing now than trying to hit certain guidelines. We do have some projects that are taking some alternatives to lead. There's environmental green building communities that we're doing for multifamily. And these are all great steps and helps the certification of really just making the building what it should be. Like it, you know, the standards are fairly, they're not loose, but they're not, you know, really hard to achieve if a building is constructed in a fairly accurate way. You know, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah. Do you get the sense that in sort of today's world that more clients are coming with an awareness that what they build does really have an impact on the environment and wanting to be conscious of that? Or is that still something that you and your firm kind of need to, infuse into the work that you do?
We will have a good mix. We'll definitely have people that come to us with a first and foremost thought on their plate to build a sustainable project. But we are located in Dallas and Fort Worth. We're still heavily a petroleum-based, oil-based economy. So there's a lot of what I kind of talked about previously is we will work in strategies and methodologies to, and just certain things that we won't do in a design if it doesn't make sense, if it's grossly going to be inefficient, or if it's going to grossly be an environmental issue, we will refuse to do those kind of things and try to educate the client why. If we have a certain product that they will come to us and want us to use, we will go through a good education of here's why we don't want to use this product, and here's a good alternative that'll get you the same thing you're looking for. And cost hopefully is not that much different, or the sustainability of it's going to be a much better effect for you.
So shifting gears a little bit from environmental responsibility to accessibility, how can architects ensure that their designs are inclusive and accessible for people of all abilities?
Well, I mean, I think we definitely make sure we follow any kind of, in Texas, ADA is referred to as TAS, as the Texas Accessibility Standards. But we also try to look at it as more of, I learned this from someone who used to be here, is no longer anymore. But especially talking about one of your clients who this may not be their kind of main importance for a building. But we always have a line: if the governor of Texas, who happens to be in a wheelchair, comes to visit you and wants to see your great project, how's he going to get in the door, right? How are we going to do this? How are we going to make him feel like this isn't an issue for you to be there? And as it goes the same for it, I've used that line and people are like, yeah, you know what? It's not that big a deal to do this or this. But, I think we also look at it in terms of, it doesn't necessarily mean what maybe comes to mind when they first hear those words, right? And it can also sell it to them in a way that, if you may be a young 30-something capable person, but you break a leg, you do something, and how are you going to get around? How are you going to operate on a day-to-day issue? If we can have these things already integrated into your project, it's going to make your life a lot easier. And those kind of things are pretty easy sales for someone. They just need to kind of put themselves in that situation or shoes, and it's not that big of an issue for us.
That's good. That's good. I mean, and it obviously, awareness of that is certainly, continuing to increase, but obviously there are still buildings that,
you and I, we see it all the time. It's like, I drives me crazy. You go to a restaurant or something, like, how is this even, it's a new restaurant. This is a new restaurant. How does this even get built? I don't know, but it happens for sure.
Absolutely. So one of the things that you talked about early on is how engaged your firm is within the local community, and how much you work with, nonprofit organizations and other things, and really see yourself as a community partner. How is that approach benefited you as an architect? This sort of kind of bringing everyone together to embrace the idea of, you know, a building being built, so dealing with, like you said, zoning and all of those things. How has that kind of work impacted you?
You know, I think it's one of the things that I mentioned earlier. It's what gets me up in the morning. So we have projects that won design awards, and we have projects that do, you know, some of the, you know, I don't know, let me start over. I was gonna say something. Like I mentioned before, that is, you know, one of the things that I've really learned is what gets me up in the morning and makes me want to come to work or stay up late and try to get things figured out. We have projects that have won design awards, and we have projects that are focused on design, but it's that ability to go into a situation or have a client come to us with an issue that they want to accomplish. They don't know how to do it. And we can, especially there will be situations where we'll have organizations that are very opposed to ideas fundamentally. To be that catalyst and to be able to come into a conversation and bring these parties together where everybody in the room all of a sudden is invested and thinks this is a good idea, and to translate that into a built environment, into a project that everyone who originally might have been opposed to it or had different ideas of what it needed to be have agreed, and I get to drive by it on the weekends when I'm doing something else and see it occupied with people and bustling and doing all the things that we hoped it would do, and then the crazy things that we never even dreamed would happen there are happening there. There's no other feeling like it. So, you know, once you get a taste of that, it's hard not to want to do that every chance we get.
Yeah, I can imagine that level of fulfillment is pretty great. Um, so have you ever driven by or seen a building or structure and thought, man, I wish I could have designed that? Is there one in particular that stands out for you?
Oh my gosh. So on AIA Fort Worth, I have been part of the design award jury or design award committee for, I don't know, 13, 14 years. I don't know. And mainly I like to do it because I like to sit in the room with the jurors. And I think our Fort Worth component always has had a really good a jury panel. And my dream juror was Jim Cutler, who I'd always been a huge fan of. It to me as a deity. He can do, you know, his work is amazing. It's transcendental to me, right? But to sit in a room with him, and he realized very quickly, as being an educator, I think, is that the reason I and the other people that are in this room were there to learn. You know, he took it as an opportunity to teach the things and kind of explain why he was saying the things he was saying. And so I was like on edge the whole day. And the funny thing, a line I remember from him saying, it's an honor award is what one of the classifications of the design award were a level of a project you wished you would have done, or you wished you would have thought of, right? And the thing Jim Cutler says, I wish I would have done a project of your, you know, whatever, probably the highest honor there is, in my opinion. But it goes back to one of the original things that the kind of the first inspirational project that I saw. I was driving, I don't even remember why, of driving between Texas and California at one point in my life. And it was before architecture school, after high school, and outside of Flagstaff, Arizona. I've been on the road for 2 days at this point. I saw a little structure on the side of the road. I don't even know what it is. I don't know what made me want to pull over. I pulled over, and it was a little A-frame kind of door that you had to open up, and you kind of crouched down to get through. And when you did, it opened up with it ended up being a chapel. You know, and it was the end of the chapel was all glass, very simply framed, and it looked out to a peak of a mountaintop. And then within the entire rafters were just little notes and thumbtacks of people who have passed through, just like me, and wrote a little message or a saying or a thought and pinned it up there. And you could tell some of them have been there for years and some of them are fairly new. And this is a structure probably not much bigger than this conference room. And I just sat down, and I don't know how long I sat in there and just read notes and looked out at the scenery, and just the fact that this little structure could have such an impact on me and just probably all the people who passed through there. I've never forgotten that. So that's the kind of, if I can do anything, if I have any kind of impact like that, that's the kind of project I wish I could do one day.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah. It's still there. I think I checked on it a few years ago. At least that was a few years ago.
Yeah,
It's
I was going to ask you if you knew if it was still there. Yeah, that those kinds of things that they're so rare, but they're just like they're I feel like they're signs from something that
yeah.
you're meant to see that at that moment.
What made me in the world? Why would I ever pull over on
Exactly.
a desert highway with a little structure that has no sign, anything? I just thought, I wonder what that is, and come through a little door that you probably shouldn't go through. All the things that you, these are all the things my mom, if she saw me, would probably be like, no, 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 you shouldn't be doing this. But
Right,
it paid
right.
off in the end.
So one of the topics that's come up a lot recently is artificial intelligence. Um, some are really afraid of what AI will do to the architecture field.
Mhm.
What's your feeling on AI? Is it more of a blessing or is it more of a threat?
I think we were looking at it as more of a tool more than anything. We were hoping for it as we're trying to understand it or the capabilities of it. But from the way we're looking at it, if I can spend a week doing a dozen iterations of a project where I can help have a tool that can do thousands iterations of a program we into it and then take that information and go from there, it's just as useful to us. And it'll help things along. I think it'll help us do the things that our brains are trained to do and maybe free us up from doing the things that we're just tired of doing or don't want to do. Or if we can take advantage of the use of that way, then um, I see it as a great thing for us to build on. And I was at AIA National in San Francisco this year, and one of the keynotes that came up, there was a discussion, and this is June of 2023, of why aren't there any seminars about AI? And the funny thing to me was that the papers, when they were due to apply to have a seminar for that conference, were due probably about 9 months before that. Wasn't even a topic on anybody's brain, wasn't even a thought. And by that point, everybody's sitting around going, why are we talking about this? Well, this is why it's happening so fast. But again, I think it's one of those things that I think it'll have great impact, but hopefully it's for the good.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I know that the call for session proposals for the national conference next year, which is here in Washington D.C.,
Right.
that just opened. So yeah,
Yep.
I mean, so that's based on people's sphere of experience and knowledge as of today.
Right. Yeah. We'll
Who
see a
knows what'll
snapshot.
happen? Yeah,
Exactly.
it is interesting. So, of all of the work that you've done in your career, is there one particular project that you are proudest of? I mean, you mentioned that it's a great feeling to drive past, a building that kind of did exactly what you were hoping and become a huge part of the community and all of that. But is there anything in particular of all of the things that you've done and worked on that you're proudest of, one in particular?
That's gonna be a hard one for me. I don't know if there really is. If anything, what usually gets me is just a collection of things that I've done within a very small circle of them of this region, that within a 30-minute drive, I can see, dozen or more projects that I am proud to call that I was some small part of, and I've seen those impacts, and they're still going today. Right? There's not the chapel off in the desert highway that I've done. I think that would be the collective of everything I've done.
And that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's great if you find yourself proud of pieces and being able to see your work. I mean, sometimes when you work on a building that is nowhere near where you are, you have to go there and visit it or
Yeah.
see it and not understand really its role in the community like you have the opportunity to do. So it's a valuable opportunity. So this is the question that we conclude all of our Ask an Architect interviews with. And that's, what's your hot take on architecture? Where do you think that you differ from the field, or what is it, the one thing that is kind of that makes you crazy about architecture right now?
I think it's the underutilization of architects' ability to solve problems on a large scale. So I think the more I talk to city officials and people that are policymakers, and there's a great opportunity for us to take the kind of problem solution mindset that we have that doesn't really think like many other people in the world do, for good and bad. There's a lot of things that come with that, but I think we have a huge opportunity that we can make a bigger change on the built environment and the communities that we live in by applying that knowledge at that level and being accessible to those people who make the policy as a voice and as an advice to give them to help change things, get them to where they want, just as it would be a design problem for a building.
And one more question. I know that you have said that you basically really have wanted to be an architect your entire life. But if you could do anything else, anything in, that's out there, is there anything else that you wish you could do, even for like a week, just to see what it's like?
Oh, it would just be a photographer. That would be, I mean, that's one of my other hobbies. It's just the ability to kind of wander and take images and kind of see the world like I do, but capture those things. I mean, it would be a dream just to be able to do that as a profession.
Yeah, it's essentially telling the story of built structures and things, and so it really does work. I know a lot of architects who actually pursue photography as a side job because it works so nicely into what it is that they do. So
for sure. And I've it's been a big hobby of mine forever, but I keep it as a hobby more than anything.
Sure. Well, Brandon, thank you so much. I definitely enjoyed this conversation. I hope I didn't stump you too much,
No.
throw you off track. We really appreciate your participating in this, and yeah, we look forward to sharing this with everybody that can see it. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you again. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Talk to you soon.
You bet.
See you at the AI National next year.
Yeah, we will definitely be there. So
okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Bye.
Take care.
See you.